for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. I can't believe I did that.
It's all good.
I just did that again. God, when did I did it recently? And again, we hadn't gone for that long, but like still, oh my God. Although that
was a practice round.
It was a practice round, exactly. And actually, it was probably helpful because now, maybe feel a little bit more comfortable. We already spoke. Not that you didn't feel comfortable, but we'll say that it was helpful for you, so that I feel a little bit better.
It was.
So, anyways, although I just did the biggest recovery podcast in the world a few weeks ago in LA, and he forgot to record for like 20 minutes outside. So we started inside, we got like an hour in, and the guy whose house he was staying at came home and walked into the living room. So we went outside and did the best 20 minutes of the interview. And all of a sudden he was like, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. And he wasn't recording. And I'm like, that's a bitch. But also now I feel better because I have done that a time or two. So anyways, guys, I'm with Carrie. And this is a crazy cool thing because Nikia, who you guys have heard me talk about before, she's been a guest on the show and has gotten me several guests, especially recently. She texted me last week and said, I heard this woman's story. It's incredible. You got to interview her. I'm not going to give you any details about her story. I just want you to hear it live. And I trust her fully. And I said, cool, send me your number. Plugged it in, went to text you, and saw I already had you in my phone. And I could tell from our last thread, which was over a year ago, exactly who you were. And it was crazy because I had wanted to ask you to come on the show before. A year ago, we spoke at a really big meeting in Carlsbad, a big 12-step meeting. And afterwards, I thought, man, and Skylar, my husband, said, too, you should ask her to be on the show. And I said, I should. But sometimes I'm a little reluctant to ask people that I meet through 12-step to get in the show. This has changed a little lately, but when I first started the show 5 years ago, if people were very 12-step based, sometimes they would kind of get concerned, like, wait, this is public. We're supposed to be anonymous. What are you doing? Does it violate the principles? So I got to a point where I was like, I'm just not even going to deal with it anymore. And I thought, she really knows the steps. I can tell from her speaking that she's very knowledgeable in this specific type of recovery. I don't want to ask her, what if she says she's too 12-step? You know what I mean? So I didn't. And then Nikia asked you a year later, and I'm so glad because I've wanted to ask you for that long. Isn't that crazy? So you're obviously like supposed to be, you're supposed to be here. Yeah. So, and I'm so sorry to make you do this again, but where are you from? Are you from Southern California?
I am from Southern California. Well, not originally, but I live in Oceanside now. I've been here just over 10 years. Okay. And I'm originally from Michigan, and I grew up with 2 other siblings. I have an older and a younger brother, and I have both parents, and I had both parents the whole time that I was growing up. And my dad was an untreated alcoholic, and my mom was an untreated Al-Anon. And so I grew up with a father who was emotionally distant, and I had a mother who was emotionally kind of all over the place, I guess is a good way to say it. And like I said in the previous part, is that my mom grew up in a generation where it wasn't just stay-at-home moms anymore. It was now you're into the workforce, but you're also responsible for all of the house responsibilities, like raising the kids, taking care of the house, cooking meals. And we did not eat out a lot as growing up. So my mom would still have to cook 3 meals a day, pack lunches, do all of that stuff.
And work full-time?
And work full-time.
What did she do? What was her job?
She was a teacher. She taught elementary school.
Wow. And also, like I said on the last one, I feel like, and I don't know that I've ever really thought about this in recent years, but there's like this generation of women in the space between women's liberation and progress to be able to work outside of the home, but then also an awareness that came later that you absolutely can do that, or you can absolutely still stay home and raise children. But there's this whole generation that I feel like we're fed the message that, well, now you have to do both. Like, we fought really hard for you guys to be able to work, but don't forget, you're actually still supposed to be at home doing mom stuff. And if you don't, you are falling down on that duty. And my mom said to me at one point, we made all this progress, and that was good. We felt like we can have it all, and you should have it all. You should be working and a mom. And what we've come to learn, and when I say we, I mean sort of like the general, women as a generation, women as a whole, and like the fight that we fought over the years, just all the things that we learn, every group, that sort of evolves together, is that we can have it all, but not at the same time. It's very difficult to be this career woman CEO, but also on the PTA
Right.
and coaching the Little League teams and cooking every night. And I feel like there's this whole generation of women that got stuck with the message that you better do both or you're failing somehow. You know, and it sounds like she was in that generation, you know?
Yeah. And I feel like for her as well, she didn't have a lot of resources or support during that time. Now we take advantage of all of this free information and just use ChatGPT or Google it, whatever it might be. Whereas she grew up in a generation where if you wanted to learn something, you went to the library and went through a card catalog. And she grew up as an only child with only children as parents. And my mom's mom, my grandmother, died when she was in her 20s. My mom was in her 20s. And so she didn't have a mom to help with childcare. She did not have close family in that way. She didn't have any aunts. She didn't have any cousins. And so, you know, the support system was not there.
Right.
And so I feel like she had to try to navigate it and do it all herself. And that can be very exhausting.
It's totally exhausting. Yeah. And it affects your mood. And can you imagine cooking without Google?
No.
Like, what do you have a cookbook on the counter?
Right.
I mean, I guess.
And there's no reviews of if whether or not it's good or not.
Or what do you need when you go to the store? You got to write it down. I sound like I'm with a pen and a paper. That would be the worst part. But it's like, obviously, that's what you did.
Right.
But that just seems so wildly inconvenient. Whereas I can be at Trader Joe's. Not that I cook anyways, but just say I wanted to. I could be, in theory, at Trader Joe's with my phone and Google a recipe and then also what I need that second versus, oh, I left my giant cookbook at home.
Right.
I forgot if I need flour or whatever. I don't even know what another ingredient would be. It's crazy. They have to do a lot of work, you know? So it makes sense to me that she was emotionally guarded or shut down or whatever happened. The messages was for you. We don't talk about We don't talk about struggles. We don't talk about conflicts. It's kind of swept under the rug.
Yeah. Just go to your room and then calm down and then we just won't talk about it later.
Okay.
And so trying to handle conflict in a healthy way, I did not have role models that showed me that. I had to learn that as an adult through my 12-step program.
Okay. And when do you start drinking or smoking weed? What's first and about what age?
I started drinking in high school. So probably in early high school. I had a friend whose parents were usually gone in the afternoon, and so we would go to her house and drink, and I immediately loved the way that I felt. You know, I felt like I could just relax. I didn't worry. I was such a worrier, and so for me, it was like that voice just kind of shut down for a while, and it also let me just do whatever I wanted without consequences. I was like, oh, well, I was drunk, so I can just do what I want, and that's my excuse for behaving badly.
Yeah. What kind of behaving badly would you do that you later would chalk up to being drunk?
Mess around with their boyfriends.
With your friends' boyfriends?
Yeah.
I did that shit too. I know. I'm just kidding.
You know, just neighborhood stuff like vandalism and things like that, and just, you know, just not a good friend, not a good girlfriend. You know.
Did you feel that at the time too, or is this in retrospect? You can look back and say that, or did you feel at the time like I'm not a good friend?
No.
Okay.
I didn't think that at all. I was just like, well, I was drunk, so whatever, get over it, you know? So.
Right. You graduate from high school, right? Because you said, and I know in our other recording, that you did pretty well with school.
I was a good student.
Kind of easy for you.
I was a good student. I didn't feel a need that I had to study very hard. That changed really quickly when I went away to school. College was a complete, like, slap in the face for me. And I went away to school because that's what everyone else was doing. So I went away to a university, and I was in a dorm room with two other roommates, which for someone who was an only girl and never having to share anything and someone with no boundaries, it was just a complete train wreck. And so right before that fall, I met the boy who eventually I ended up marrying, but he was, you know, probably in the same shape as I was, if not worse. Okay. And so he would come up every weekend and stay in my dorm with me with my other two roommates. And he was very much into marijuana. And so I started smoking that all the time with him. And in college, you actually have to read books and study for tests. And I had no skills or inkling of even how to do that. I remember going to my first week of classes and I got like a chapter assigned in every class. I'm like, how am I supposed to read 4 chapters in 1 week? That's impossible. How can anyone ask that of me? And I was just completely blown away with the workload from college. So needless to say, that semester was just a complete train wreck.
Dude, that's exactly what you're saying is what happened to me. I went away to school because that's what everyone does. Mm-hmm. I had 2 female roommates. There were 3 of us in a room. I had no boundaries, but for me, that meant I just took all their shit all the time. I would wear their stuff, fucking put it back, smell like cigarette smoke. I was the nightmare. These 2 girls probably still hate me wherever they are. I remember their names, and I've looked them up on Facebook, and of course, they ended up doing like really well because we went to a good college. But same thing. I had no idea it was going to be harder. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds dumb, but I was like, oh my God, this is so much harder. And I just quit. Mm-hmm. I went back to Georgia, sort of to go to the University of Georgia, but I didn't keep going. I was shocked and surprised at how much harder it was. And I feel like you're the first person that has ever explained it that clearly and similarly to how I felt. Mm-hmm. I was floored. And I know it sounds dumb. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's supposed to be harder. I was not expecting this.
No.
But I feel like that's a hallmark of addiction. The rules don't apply to me.
Correct.
I don't have to work that hard because, look, I never have. And you know what? I'm not gonna.
Yeah. I feel like for me...
What school did you go to?
Michigan State.
Okay.
And so I went away to school, and I had some money saved up from from graduation, and that was supposed to like be my spending money for the semester. And so I'm at this school with all of these rich kids whose parents are sending them allowances, and they're going to the mall and bringing back new clothes, and I'm like, they're like going to the cafeteria to eat, and I just felt like I was less than them then. And so I blew through that money on marijuana and pizza, like just ordering out food for that. And my mom's like, well, you better get a job. I'm like, a job? Like what? I just remember being like so entitled, like I deserve this because all of these other kids are doing, just making it look so easy. And I felt so less than because I was so struggling so much. And so I moved back home after that. And so I started going to like community college, and then I would commute back and forth downtown to a college in downtown Detroit. And it was doing okay. I got a little job. And so I think the structure really helped me to kind of, keep on track. And then I ended up marrying that guy.
Okay.
He had a friend who was in the Marines, and he decided that that's what he wanted to do too.
Okay. How old are you when you get married?
23.
Okay. And are y'all living together at that point, or are you still living at home? Okay, so at some point you guys live together.
Yeah, we lived together. As soon as I could get out of the house, I did.
Okay.
I probably moved out when I was like maybe 19 or 20.
Okay.
As soon as he got in an apartment,
I moved in with him.
And so I was sort of living at home, but sort of not. And so he went to boot camp, and the interesting thing is that he went to boot camp the summer before 9/11.
Oh.
We got married on September the 4th, a week before 9/11 happened. And so he gets out of the Marines, and he's going to just do his time and get out. And as soon as he graduates, we get married. And then a week later, 9/11 happens, and our life completely changes.
Holy shit.
And so he's immediately...
Because he didn't expect a foreign conflict,
No.
and now there is one.
Now there is one. So everything changes. And so he goes to his trainings. I end up moving to Florida for a little while, California for a little while. And so, there's some geographical things in here. And it's because he's in the Marine Corps, we've stopped smoking weed, but we're still drinking pretty heavily. But at least the drug use kind of tampered down a little bit. But then when he got shipped over to Iraq and came back, he immediately said, well, I don't want to be married anymore, and just left. And so I'm like in California, I'm 25 years old, and it's a complete free-for-all. I'm an adult for the first time, away from my family, not married anymore or separated. And it's like, it was on.
Wow. Okay, so did you graduate from the community college?
No.
Okay, so you'd stopped to basically be married.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm basically taking like one class at a time.
Okay.
So I'm working a full-time job.
What were you doing job-wise?
A lot of it was banking related.
Okay, like what you still do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I've been in the same industry for a long time.
Okay.
I was going to school for accounting, but I was taking like a couple classes at a time. And then every time I'd move, you have to start over.
Yeah. Were you moving with him because he was getting moved to different bases? Mm-hmm. Okay, so did you end up at Pendleton in California? Is that how you got out here?
He was at Miramar.
Oh, right.
And so I lived in Mira Mesa for a little while. This was in the early 2000s.
How long did he go away to Afghanistan? Did he do
gone
like
for
a year?
He was gone for 8 months.
Wow.
And then came
in
back.
combat?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No, but
What changed his mind? What made him come back and say, never mind?
He was just an immature kid at the time.
Sure, okay.
And his mom had got diagnosed with breast cancer, and he wanted to be there with her. And there's a lot of, codependency and things like that with him and his parents. That's a story for another podcast. But, as soon as he got back to Michigan, he went back to his old ways with his old friends and basically, just reverted back. He was doing really well when he was away from all of that. But once he went back there, it was done. And so he said that he didn't want to be married anymore. And so I was heartbroken. But at the same time, this whole new world of other drugs and other experiences opened up to me.
Totally. Plus now you have a little alimony, right?
Nope.
No,
nothing.
Oh, you actually weren't married that long, huh? Is that why, or
no? Well, we didn't
it.
Get divorced in California.
Okay,
we were just separated. I didn't actually end up getting divorced until several years later after I had moved into a different state, and I guess the rules are different there.
Okay. I
was just really. Neither of us had anything.
Right.
We were young kids, so there's really nothing to have. But
my mind always go to alimony when I'm divorced to this day.
Straight to the alimony.
Totally. I'm like, what's the math on that? 20%, half the time you were married. All right. So you're out here, you're 25, now you're suddenly single. What do you start doing drug-wise? How does it ramp up, and with what? And with whom, I guess, too?
So I was living with roommates at the time, and my roommate, bless her heart, like we would go out together. Like her husband was still in the Marines, and we would just go out, like her and I, and she was very loyal, but she was basically like my wing girl, and she just kind of kept me out of trouble because I would go out and just get completely annihilated, and she would have to deal with me.
Yeah.
And and sometimes I would just go home with random people, and she wouldn't know where I was or who I was with, and I put a lot of pressure on her. Yeah. I went out with some roommates and stuff, or not roommates, but some colleagues and stuff at the time, and they introduced me to meth and some other things, and so it went kind of from zero to a lot in a very short window of time.
There's some cocaine in the middle of that. Like you just went right to meth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Did you like meth right away?
I did.
Okay.
I liked the feeling that I got. It was like, because I felt like for me, I always overdid it with drinking. Like there was no like middle ground, so I was always like hungover. I was always just completely wasted, and for me, it's like, okay, well now I can just do a little bit of this, and it lasts for so long.
Totally. So how often do you start doing meth? And are you just smoking it? Or are you snorting it?
Smoking it at the time.
Okay.
Not for that much, and then in between this time, I meet a guy online who I end up becoming my second husband, but I dated some real weirdos in between that time, just people I met online, and I wasn't
online, like dating apps. Were they were already a thing back then? Okay.
So I met my second husband on a really classy site. It was called Hot or Not.
That's amazing.
You basically post a picture and people rate you. It's
gosh,
very classy site.
Okay. And he rated you hot, and you guys connected. That's amazing. I remember from that time because I had a boyfriend. We broke up, and I went in his phone or his computer, and he was on Plenty of Fish. And that was the first time I thought, because it's 2007 or something, I was like, wait, what is this? And then I realized it was a dating site. I was like, oh my gosh, online? But that was like the birth of all of it. So Hot or Not, you meet this guy, okay? And how does that relationship progress? And is he doing meth also?
No, he was just a drinker, really. And so at the time, I was not addicted to the point where I couldn't walk away at that point. And so we would just drink together, and that was kind of it. If there was weed around, we would smoke it, but it was still kind of manageable at that point. My drinking probably not so much, but everything else was still manageable. And he was originally from Louisiana, so after he got out of the service, he asked me to move back to Louisiana with him. And
he was in the service too? Okay. And
so when he got out of the service, we moved to Louisiana, which was a complete culture shock for me, moving from San Diego to rural Louisiana. It was like I cried just for the first couple months I was there. I wasn't working, I wasn't going to school, and I was like, why did I do this? This is a complete disaster. And I ended up starting to work and going to school, and things started to be okay. I was bartending and going to school during the day. We ended up growing apart for a while, so we broke up for a few months and then ended up getting back together, but I just wasn't really into living there. And so we looked around, and we found that moving to Houston might be a good idea because the housing prices were still good, and we both could transfer with our jobs. And once we get to, Houston, like things change. Like we started getting around a different crowd, and the drugs were very fluent and flowing, and I started getting consequences. Like I got let go from a couple jobs. I was estranged from my family at the time. I wasn't really close with them. And if they did come to see me, we were arguing and getting into fights to where I remember one time my mom had come to visit, and then she ended up leaving early just because of our behavior.
Because you and the boyfriend were fighting, or you and her would get in a fight?
That one. Like me and her would fight.
Okay.
But there was times when like they would be at our house and we would be like up in the bedroom like getting high.
Okay. And is it meth again?
Meth mostly, but
okay.
We were doing ecstasy. We were going like to all these like interesting clubs. I'm just going to leave it at that. And
like S&M clubs or something?
Along those lines.
Or like bondage or something? Okay, you don't have to tell me. I don't know why that's the first thing that came to my mind.
The first one. Maybe right, on round 2.
Okay, we'll do a part 2.
So, yeah. So anyways, we start going out to these clubs with these interesting people, and it's just, all morals are just completely thrown out the window. Like anything is on the table, and it's just, it started off being fun with a group out, and then it started being like, okay, well, we'll just have people over at the house and get high, and then it was just me and him getting high, and then it was like, us in separate rooms getting high, tweaking out and doing weird things. It was just, it started getting really dark really fast. And, we just needed a change. And so that was the geographical change that we all like to do because we think things are going to be different. So I ended up getting a job out in California, and I thought it was my dream job and we were going to get a fresh start. And we came out here, and, the drugs were kind of shut down because we didn't pursue them here. But I just started drinking every single day. And so I just made up for all of that, because I still had the same feelings, the same emotions, same uncomfortableness, but now I had nothing but alcohol to kind of soothe that. And so,
what was the job that you moved out here for? Also in baking? Okay, okay. And what age are you at that point?
I was 37 at the time.
And had y'all gotten married by then? Okay, so you were actually married.
Yeah, we got to Houston, and that's when we had gotten married. We didn't invite any of our family. We just did it. Again, we're both like estranged. Like we're not really close with our families. We're like, forget it.
Yeah.
So we basically substituted our friends for our family and made them, the center of our world. But it just, things just started. We started seeing consequences happen to our friends, or at least the people that we thought were friends. And then after we moved away, it's just hard. Every time you move, you have to kind of start over.
Totally, yeah.
And so trying to find friends here, at least initially, was, besides coworkers, because that's really all I did.
Yeah.
I would go to work in the morning, still hungover from the previous night, and then I would try to have to get through half of the day until like the Advil and the juice and the Pedialyte and all of my little concoctions that I would think that would make me feel better, and then just sort of spend the rest of the day trying to catch up and working late into the night to try to make up for the stuff that I wasn't doing, and then going home and starting to drink again.
Right.
And so it was this endless loop of just, drinking and working and drinking and working. And my life became very, very small.
Did you think either in Louisiana or in Houston or when you came back, did you ever think like, I think I drink too much, I might be an addict, I should try to stop, maybe I go to a meeting? Did you ever think anything along those lines?
It's so interesting that you asked me that, because my younger brother, he's an alcoholic, an addict as well. He got sober in his early 20s and is still sober today, over 20 years later. My older brother is an alcoholic and an addict, and he's currently homeless in Escondido right now.
Oh, wow.
I'm actually going to see him after this show today. So
where is he in Escondido?
Kind of near the Felicita area.
Okay, so literally you're just going to pull up on a street where he's nearby?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's nice of you to go see him. How do you know where he is? Does he have a phone? You guys
can communicate? He does not have a phone.
Okay, but you kind of know where he is.
He's got mental health issues too, and so his mental health doesn't allow him to trust. So he doesn't carry phones with him, and of course his drug use doesn't help with that either.
Right, okay.
And so for me, it's like I have to wait for him to reach out, and it might just be, hey, can you bring me some food today?
And he reached out today?
Yeah.
Okay, wow, and said this is where I'm going to be. Oh, wow. Well, it's really nice of you to go do that.
So I see that with my brothers and my dad, right? So it's in front of my face the whole time. In my mind, in my sick mind, I'm like, I'm not like them.
I'm not like them. I have a job.
I have a job. As long as I have my job and I'm making money, then I don't have a problem. And I would try to cut down or to stop, and it would last like maybe a day or two, and that is it. I just felt like if I tried hard enough, because, I'm smart, I can power my way through this, and I can think my way out of this issue.
Yeah.
And it wasn't an issue yet. And so I was in this pit of denial for the entire part to where I didn't want to acknowledge it at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so I saw with my brother, I actually went to an Al-Anon meeting for my brother, and to deal with how,
he was acting?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Like, I was very quick to point out everybody else's issues and never looked at myself at all.
Yeah, yeah. So you're living in California, you've got this job, but you've had some consequences. Do you ever get arrested?
No.
Okay.
My husband would always drive when we would go out because I was always such a mess. Okay. And so, or we wouldn't go out, because I would always, it wouldn't happen every time, but like there would just be certain circumstances that I would snap and I would just start behaving like very erratically, like going out the fire exit door at a restaurant, or having like causing a scene or something like that, to where, it was embarrassing to go out with me.
Yeah, yeah. So how long does that period last where you're living out here, drinking a ton? What progresses from there?
So I moved out here in early 2015, and so at the end of 2017, so it's like New Year's Eve, and my neighbor next door was having a party for New Year's Eve, and she invited us over, and we were so excited because we're like, wow, we can go next door. We don't have to drive anywhere to be so safe, right? So we bring over all the alcohol that we're going to drink for the night, which is a lot, and we're having a good time at the party, meeting people and talking. And right before midnight, my husband went back over to our house to get this really big bottle of Johnny Walker we had gotten on a cruise ship at some point. And so he starts pouring shots for everybody at the party, and then he finished the rest of the bottle. And so we were both pretty intoxicated and messed up. I don't even remember walking home. And so we get back to the house, and we start arguing, but I still don't know exactly what we were arguing about. There's a lot of like holes in, the story. And I just remember that we were fighting, and then I was going to go sleep in the other room. I was going to storm off, say some choice words and go into the other bedroom to sleep for the night. And as I'm walking to the other bedroom, I hear like this clink, clink, clink. And I look down in the hallway, and he had thrown his wedding ring out into the hallway. And so, of course, that infuriates me. And I'm like, oh, just throw your ring away. Oh, just throw our marriage away, whatever. And slam the door and act all erratic like I do. And so I locked the door and climbed into bed. And he started trying to get into the room where I was at. And he found that it was locked and started just acting real irate and was like banging on the door. And he was very like mild-mannered person. Like he didn't get like angry or like aggressive like that. And so I knew right away that there was something that wasn't quite right. And so he's like banging on the door, trying to get in. And it's like he was hitting the door so hard, I felt like it was going to come off the hinges. And so it was really scary for me. And I was like, what's going on? And like, maybe I need to call somebody to intervene, because I wasn't sure what would happen if he got in the room, because he was acting weird.
And he hadn't prior to this been abusive?
Not anyway.
Wow. Okay.
And so I'm like, I have no clothes on. I'm like crouched in the corner. I'm like calling 911 from my phone. And I hear him screaming for me to come out of the room. He's like, Carrie. And while I'm on the phone with the 911 operator, I hear a gunshot in the other room. And so I'm like screaming into the phone. I'm like, he's shooting in the house. You need to get here right now. And he's still screaming for me to come out of the room. And so I'm like, well, why does he want me to come out of the room? Is he going to shoot me? Like, I am like freaking out at this point. Like, what is going to happen? And so I hear a second gunshot. And at this point, I'm still like yelling at the 911 operator. They're like, stay where you are. Do not come out of the room. And I hear sirens in the distance. And so I hear a third gunshot. And the police come up my driveway. The room that I was in was facing the street. And so I like open up the window. I've got like a sheet wrapped around me. And I'm like screaming for them to come into the house. And so they try to open the door and it's locked. So they end up just knocking it in with one of those battering ram things. And so they come up the stairs and they're like, ma'am, just stay where you are. Don't come out of the room. And I'm screaming at the police. I'm like, is he okay? Is he okay? And so the one officer comes out of the room where my husband was, and he looks at me and he's like, no, ma'am, he's not okay.
And so he shot himself? Oh, are you okay? Okay.
So he was 42 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And immediately...
So first of all, thank you for sharing this so openly.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And so this was the point where it's like, you can't hide anymore from this, you know? And everyone wants to ask me, like, well, was he depressed? Did he have PTSD? Like, everyone wants to put a label on that. You know, that was never anything that he was diagnosed with. And, you know, he never had gone to a therapist, so there was never any diagnosis for that type of thing. But, you know, for me, it was like, you make a bad decision when you've been drinking. Like, how many of us have, you know, done that? All of us, right?
Right.
And so for me, it's like the veil's dropped, you know? It's like there's no more hiding.
Yeah.
Because the first thing that I have to do is call his dad and tell him that his son is dead.
Oh my god.
And call his siblings and tell them that their brother is dead. And it was the worst phone calls I've ever had to make.
Oh my gosh.
And so it just, at that point I knew, I'm like, that's it. You know, I have to change my life. Something has to change. I cannot drink again.
Wow.
And so I knew what I had to do, but I had no skills.
Yeah.
I had no way to cope with that situation at all. And to tell you the extent of our family dynamic, my sober brother was on the first flight out. So this happened on Monday, at the early hours of a Monday morning. He was on the first flight out. And my not sober brother today, he strolled in sometime that afternoon. And after I told him that I wasn't going to drink again, he finished all the beer in my refrigerator because he figured that I wouldn't need it. So that was his contribution.
Yeah, okay.
My parents didn't come out until Thursday.
Okay.
Which I had a lot of resentment towards them for that. And there was a lot of times where I would call my mom, just, you know, wanting her to be a mom. And she'd be like, so how's the weather out there? You know, like, completely change the subject. And, you know, looking back now, it's like, well, of course she didn't know how to handle that situation. Yeah. Of course she didn't. But anyway, I found out at that point what true friends really look like. And I'll tell you that all my drinking and drug friends just poof.
Yeah.
My husband's best friend at the time, the day after it happened, sent me dick pics. So that tells you...
No way.
That tells you the quality of the people that we were hanging out with.
The next day?
Yeah.
Oh my god. That is actually like the wildest part of the entire... I mean it's not, but holy shit.
Yeah, we were hanging out with some very quality people during those times.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Did you answer?
I just told him off, and we have not spoken since.
Sure.
So that's kind of the end of that. But
holy shit.
But there were some people who were there for me in ways that I would have never possibly expected. One of them was actually a volunteer for an organization called Trauma Intervention Program, or TIP. And they send out volunteers to go to homes where tragic and trauma has happened to sit with the person who's left, like the family who's left, like accidents and fires, things like that. So this woman showed up at my house. Her name was Andrea.
It's a really cool service. Is that just in San Diego?
I think that they have them other places too.
Wow.
But she was out at like 1 o'clock in the morning and stayed for a 12-hour shift with me.
Wow.
So if you think about when this happened, it was in the middle of the night, right? And so there was
New Year's Eve.
Right, exactly. And so I couldn't call anybody until like 5 or 6 in the morning, because you're not going to call somebody with that kind of news that early, you know? And so she just sat with me. It was me and her, and my neighbor had come back over to sit with me too. But it was like, you know, I would have not known what to do with myself, because it's like all of these feelings and things go through your mind. Like, I describe it like, say you turn on like 10 radio stations all at the same time. Like, that's how my brain felt. Because it's like everything that I saw in the house was like not just a comb or, you know, a lipstick, whatever it is. It's like all of those things had a memory of David with it. It's like, oh, there's a plate in the sink. Oh, that was David's last meal. Oh, his last meal was a corn dog. I can't believe that's the last thing he ate. Oh my gosh, there's his shoes that he just got for Christmas. He never even got a chance to wear them. Oh, there's our cruise fund jar that we never got to do. Like all of these things, like everything around the house is just being bombarded with all of these memories and feelings and emotions. And it's like, I've got nothing to cope.
I feel like that might be the most profound way I've ever heard grief put into words. Mm-hmm. What you just said, like turning on 10 radio stations at once, and everything in your vision is connected to a memory of the person. Mm-hmm. That's one of the most powerful ways I've ever heard grief described. Did law enforcement contact TIP?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because like I didn't know that was a thing. I'm sure you didn't know that was a thing. They contact this person who comes and sits with you like a social worker or something.
I thought she was a social worker. She's just a volunteer. These are people who are doing this on their own time.
Oh,
they're not getting paid for this. And it was like, I can't believe that people like that exist.
Me neither.
It was the first way I've seen service in action, to where someone is 100% selfless doing something for a stranger. And I was like, wow, I didn't know people like you existed.
Oh.
And that was just like the tip of the iceberg for me going into a 12-step program, which is all about service. That gave me a taste of what that's supposed to look like and feel like.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And I still go and speak with that organization.
You do?
They've asked me to come and speak at their training sessions. And I've gone out there most years, probably 3 or 4 times a year, to speak at their training.
What a beautiful, beautiful service.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I immediately assumed, even though you said volunteer, it's like that didn't reach my brain.
Yeah.
I assumed social work job. Because my first co-host worked for PERT, which was a job, which shows up, you know, like maybe if your brother gets in trouble, somebody from PERT's also going to be there, just make sure he's okay. I thought job, you know. So you're in the house, it's New Year's Eve, she's with you. How do you start? What does the next day look like, and the day after that? I mean, do you get to take time off of work? Do you get grief leave? What do you do?
It's such a good question, because I was never put in that position before. I had no idea how to deal with somebody passing away. My grandfather had passed away when I was 13, but that was really the only like loss I had experienced growing up. And so the TIP program actually brought me some resources.
Okay.
And so Andrea, the volunteer, sat with me and she's like, okay, let's make a list of who we need to call. Okay, you know, obviously our bedroom is a crime scene. So what do you do about that? So there's actually an organization called ServPro who will come out and clean up that situation. I mean, you don't think about, like, who do you call for that? Because the police just leave.
They just leave?
They just take him and they leave.
Okay.
And so everything is, I mean, my door is knocked in.
Whoa.
My room is a crime scene, and I'm in this house. And had Andrea not been there, I would have been in that house by myself.
Oh my gosh. I hope they have that everywhere. I bet they don't. I bet we're lucky in California and we have that. But I wonder if they have that in Missouri.
Right.
You know what I mean? Wow. Okay.
And so
she helps you, she walks you through the next tasks you have to do.
And to me, that's what I needed. I needed steps in action, because otherwise I couldn't eat. I was still still intoxicated.
Right.
You know, I asked my neighbor, I said, you know, what time did we leave your house? Because again, there's a lot of black spots in my night that night. And she said, you guys probably left around 1:00. When I got his death certificate back, it said 1:20.
So it was like right when you guys got home?
All of this happened.
It exploded in like 20 minutes?
Yeah, from 0 to insanity in 20 minutes.
Holy shit. Was there any question when the cops got there of you being a suspect? Or it was clear? I guess it was clear.
They came in and interviewed me. I know that there's somebody who sat with me and asked me a lot of questions. I can't even tell you to this day what they asked me. I was so, like, completely out of my mind at that time. You know, I'm still drunk. I've got all this adrenaline rushing through me. I've got all of these waves of grief. Like, I was just this emotional disaster melting pot. And I can't even tell you what that woman said to me or asked me.
Yeah, yeah. But that never went anywhere. Obviously, it was clear.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay, so your family shows up, you get the scene cleaned up, and then what does your life look like in the coming months? And do you stop drinking that day?
I stopped drinking that day. The last drink that I ever had was at my neighbor's house up until this day.
Until right now?
Until right now.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Wow. But I had no skills. I had no program. I had no tools.
You're just gritting your teeth through it. And you're probably in shock at first.
It was probably the darkest time of my entire life, because I had all of this emotion and nothing to do with it. My sober brother encouraged me to get into grief counseling, which I didn't get into until I think sometime in February was the first time that I went to a counseling session. And then the funniest story is that I never intended to come into 12-step at all. I belonged to a public speaking group called Toastmasters.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of Toastmasters.
And so I had a girl in my Toastmasters club who actually gave a speech about AA. And I remember after she gave the speech, I went up to her and I was telling her, like, I have a whole family full of alcoholics. My brother's an alcoholic. My dad's an alcoholic. And, like, And she's probably like thinking like, yeah, you probably are too, honey.
That's hilarious. You're actually a very good speaker, so that makes sense to me. Like this whole time, you're very poised and you're a great speaker.
Thank you.
So and now it kind of makes sense to me because my 12-step guests have the best stories in recovery, but they're not always speakers, right? And so sometimes there's a lot, and then, and I actually noted from the beginning, I'm like, wow, she's actually really good. Now this makes sense. Wow. Okay. So you go to Toastmasters.
I go to Toastmasters.
Yeah, I know so many alcoholics. It's weird.
I know.
I used to say that about dating. I remember having this conversation with one of my best friends growing up. He was like, I was like, do I have a type? I was like 28. Mm-hmm. And he was like, no, not at all. And I was like, I know. They all look really different and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, you know what, though? If you locked them in a room with like a bottle of Jack and a joint, like those motherfuckers would get down together. And I'm like, they would. And I'm like, that's weird. I've dated a lot of alcoholics. That's weird. My dad's not an alcoholic. Because, they say you date someone like your dad. I'm like, my dad's not an alcoholic. That's weird. And then like 5 years later, I was like, oh, right. It kind of makes sense. So, yeah. So you tell her after her speech, I loved your speech. I know so many alcoholics.
So this was probably a couple years before all this happened. And
okay.
After everything happened with my husband, her and I are going to like a Toastmasters event. It was like a conference or something. And so we drove together. And I remember telling her in the car, I quit drinking after all this happened. And she's like, oh, that's awesome. So do you want to go see this speaker with me? And I'm like, oh, see a speaker, like, Toastmasters or a TED Talk. I was like, wow, a motivational speaker. That's going to be awesome. What's their name? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, how do you know? Why do you want to go see a speaker you don't even know who they are? Like, that didn't, like, connect with me at all. She's like, oh, it's this place, and they always have good speakers. I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Well, she took me to my first AA meeting. And
did she purposely say it like that?
I don't know if that was her intention, but she definitely was very didn't tell me what where we were going.
Yeah, well, that was smart if she did do it on purpose. By the way, I have to tell you, since you're a speaker person too, I don't know if you saw this. I just did a TED Talk last month.
That's amazing.
About
that doesn't
recovery
surprise
stuff.
Me at all.
And they delivered that to my home. Isn't that cool?
It's beautiful.
There's a giant picture of me over here. Also, I feel like I need to explain to people. People are like, wow, Janine, just like a giant picture of yourself. It's huge. It's like 3 feet tall or 2 feet tall of me on the floor in here. Like, they brought that to me. I swear to God, I didn't have that made. So you go to your first meeting. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this was a meeting in Carlsbad. It was a big speaker meeting at that time.
Is it the one I met you at?
Yes, but it was a different 12-step.
Oh, okay.
And so we had gone to that meeting, and the interesting thing was there's always like a meeting before a meeting. And so we're at the restaurant across the street, and I'm talking to some of her friends about kind of what got me there. And they're like, there's somebody you need to meet. And so they bring over this woman, and I've come to find out that her husband had passed away from suicide 6 months before.
Wow.
And she wasn't even supposed to be at the meeting that night. She was there because she was driving an older member to the meeting. Okay. And so she wasn't supposed to be there, but somehow she was, and I was able to find somebody day one who knew exactly what I was going through.
Wow.
So that was the God shot number one.
For sure. Did she end up sponsoring you, or is just someone you connected with?
No, someone I connected with, and we're still connected to this day, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
She comes back into the story a few other times, which is really, really interesting. But, she was there that first day, and I don't remember exactly what the speaker said, but I know that I related to what she was talking about. It took me a little bit longer to get to my second meeting because I really wasn't sure kind of how it all worked. But at the time, they had these paper schedules that had the meeting information on. They may have had online ones, but I think that was before all of that. And so I ended up going to my second AA meeting, and I end up meeting the woman who's going to be my sponsor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What made you ask her?
So it's an interesting story. As soon as I walk into the room, I'm just like this, emotional mess, just completely just crying and probably being annoying, whatever. And she gives me her...
You weren't being annoying. But I'm not going to let that slide. Your husband had just killed himself 20 feet from you.
Yeah.
You weren't being annoying.
But
okay.
So this is probably like in April. Like my first meeting was at the end of March.
Okay.
And so this was probably mid-April. And she's the first person to introduce herself, give me her phone number. And I just remember her sharing in such an open, honest, and very raw way. And I was like, whoa, like, I can't believe she just shared that in a room full of people, kind of embarrassing stuff. And I was like, whoa, you know. And for me, someone who's that honest about really embarrassing things and can be that open and accepting of that, it was new for me to see that. And so I kind of had an idea of that I was going to ask her, but I didn't for a while. I remember calling my sober brother, and I'm like, how do you ask somebody to be a sponsor? He's like, well, what I recommend that you would do is go out with them outside of the meeting, because they may be super cool in the meeting and then go home and kick their dog. You know, you want to make sure that they're a good, decent human being.
That's good advice, actually. Yeah, so, that's good advice.
And I call my brother a lot for stuff, even to this day when I'm going through things, especially program stuff. We're really, really close.
That's awesome.
And so I just ended up seeing him this past weekend, and with my mom too. And so our relationship has really come full circle since all of this happened. But
you and your mom also?
Yeah, with my mom especially. It's really come a long way.
Oh, cool.
So it's interesting how all of that works out.
Yeah.
But so I asked her to be my sponsor, and she does, and she's perfect for me. She's got
Is she still your sponsor to this day?
She's still my sponsor. She has over 30 years of recovery. She sponsors a lot of women, and she's not one that has a lot of rules for me. She's allowed me to kind of go at my own pace.
Mine doesn't either.
And I appreciated that. You know, it wasn't like, you have to call me every day, you have to do all of this. Like, no, like, I'm here when you're ready. And she would always pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And I feel like she still has a little bit of trauma for me from this day, because every time I call her now, she's like, are you okay? What's up? Are you all right? And so I'm like, no, I'm just calling to say hi.
My best friend from high school does that to me to this day, and I finally had to tell her to stop. I'm like, bro, I got 10 years. I'm not going to be calling you drunk, probably. Because still to this day, I'll call her and we never leave each other messages. We just call, hang up, and she'll text me back, you okay? And I'm like, but Carrie, I haven't called you upset in a really long time, you know? But wait, what was traumatizing to her? Did you call her once really upset?
I used to call her all the time. Like anytime something went wrong, it was like she was my first call.
Sure.
And so between her and I had gone to grief counseling, but I ended up staying with that same counselor for the first 4 or 5 years of my recovery. And so I felt like I had kind of the best of both worlds. I had my counselor, and if my counselor and my sponsor told me the same thing, then I knew that's what I had to do, even if I didn't want to. Right. I knew that it was good advice, because I was getting 2 people that I trusted to give me the same information. So anyway, we started working our steps, and, you know, for me, you know, number one, resentment, like parents, like mom, number one, dad, number two. And so there was a lot of work that had to be done there. And so for me, I feel like how far I've come with my mom, it's like night and day. I'm going to fast forward a little bit with that, because I want to get a little bit more about that relationship.
Okay.
But a couple of years ago, my dad passed away. He had a stroke, and like every good alcoholic, didn't want to do anything the doctor told him, didn't want to do any of the exercises, didn't want to do any of the things. And we just watched him waste away. For less than a year, he was gone. And so up until that point, you know, I'm trying to help my mom move, and you know, kind of where they were trying to move to Texas so they could be closer to my brother. That's where he lives now. And so my brother and I go out to Michigan, and we're trying to pack up their house and get it moved. And I remember talking to my brother in the car. I'm like, you know, I was never there for mom. You know, I was never there for her as a daughter. And I'm just kind of boo-hooing at him in the car. And he's like, Carrie, are you done kicking your own ass now? Let's get to work. You know, the past is the past. Let's move forward and start realizing that you're being of service for her today.
Aww.
And so that was a pretty cool moment. And so I got to help them get my dad out there, get him moved in. And the magic, though, was that after he passed away, I got to really be there for my mom, because I knew firsthand what it felt like to lose a husband.
Yeah.
And so we got her into grief counseling, you know, got her into a grief group, just got her... picked up the phone when she called, didn't ask her how the weather was, just let her cry into the phone and told her that it was going to be okay.
Oh my gosh.
And so I remember probably about a year ago, I had gone to visit her, and you know, she's got no boundaries to this day, and she knows that I'm on a 3-hour time lag. 5:30 in the morning, she's stacking up dishes, you know.
Gosh.
So I'm like going out of my mind, ready to yell at her, right? And so I just took a deep breath, and I said a prayer for some patience, and I walked out into the kitchen, and she's like, do you have a minute? Can you sit down? And I'm like, sure. And so we sit down, and she said, you know, honey, I owe you an apology. And I said, for what, Mom? And she said, you know, I was never really there for you when David died. And she said, I know that now because I see how much you've been there for me.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like all of that resentment was just gone. And so I didn't realize that no matter what we go through, the hardest stuff is the stuff that we're actually going to use to help other people. And it all came full circle at that moment. And it was several years into recovery that happened.
And then it came back and helped you too.
Yeah.
So that painful stuff ultimately circled back to help you release a resentment you'd been holding on to. That's a beautiful way to look at that.
And a little bit before that, my sponsor's husband had passed away too. He had gotten diagnosed with a rare disease, and within a few months he passed away. And so I got to be there for my sponsor too. It's like she was there for me, and now I get to be there for her.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of things that, you know, I didn't realize. I knew nothing about grief, and I never knew about managing grief or what that felt like or what it looked like. And now I feel like that's, you know, my strong point. I have a lot of experience in it, and I have used that to help a lot of people, or at least be there for them in a way that people were not there for me.
Totally.
You know, and it's amazing how little you have to say.
Okay.
People always wonder, like, what should I say in those situations? It's like, you don't have to say anything.
Okay.
Because there's nothing that you can say that's going to make that person be there. You know, so just a hug.
Yeah. You know what? I love that you're saying this, because there's this moment that sticks out for me still to this day. My brother almost died when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. He didn't. He was in this horrible car accident, and they wheeled him in. They had us stand in the wrong place, and my mother and I were standing there, and they wheeled him in, and he was mangled. Like, he was bloody, and his arm was snapped, his neck was broken, and, you know, he almost died. And they wheeled him past us, and I just, like, sank to the floor in the hospital, and I thought he was going to die. Mm-hmm. And he didn't. He was forever changed, but he didn't die. And, like, 4 weeks later, one of my friends from, like, middle school and high school, not best friends, but someone I'd gone to, like, gymnastics with and carpooled with, her brother was in a car accident. They were the same age, and she and I were the same age, and he did die. Wow. And when I heard that he had died, the feeling that I felt that it wasn't Danny, and that I felt so bad for her, is impossible to put into words. And then I saw her maybe 3 months later, 4 months later, on the University of Georgia campus. We were walking towards each other, and she didn't see me. She had her head down. But I saw her, and I thought, say something. Say something. And I was so overwhelmed with, like, the grief for her and the grief that I had narrowly missed, that I didn't say anything. Mm-hmm. And I think about that to this day. I was 19 when that happened. That was over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I still think about it. What should you say? What I mean, that is a good question. What do you do when somebody close to you is in grief, and I'm a good speaker, but I don't know what to say either. What do you do?
I mean, everyone's different. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I felt the things that were most helpful is just checking in. How are you doing? Yeah. And you already know the answer. I'm doing terrible, you know. Right. I feel like complete crap, you know. But just knowing that someone's there, you know, now we have emojis and all that stuff. You can just send, like, hey, here's a hug for you. Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about you. Yeah. You know, just knowing that people are there if you need them is really important.
That's really helpful for, like, us to know, you know. So did you move from the house?
I did. I stayed there for a couple years.
You did?
I did. And I think people are surprised at that because, you know.
Well, but it's like, what are you going to do? You have to have money to move. You got to find a new place. I mean, logistics are still logistics of life.
I remember freaking out and talking to my counselor about that. I'm like, I need to move. I need to do that. And she's like, well, Carrie, did you ever think that maybe you just don't need to do anything? Of course, that wasn't even on my radar at all. And so she's like, are you afraid in the house? I'm like, well, no. Because up until that point, I mean, that was a house that had love and beautiful memories, you know? Yeah. And I would not go into that room after that happened. And I didn't see him after it. I didn't see him at the funeral home. I did not want to have any of those memories in my mind of that. Okay. Because I knew that if I saw any of that I would never be able to forget it, and I would not be able to unsee it. And so for me, that was still a place of love, and, you know, we had beautiful memories there. And so I stayed for a couple years, but then, like a lot of us do in recovery, like, everything has changed. Like, the people that I hang out with are completely different. I moved into a new place a couple years ago. I'm in a new relationship now, which that it's a whole other story for another session. Also, I've changed jobs. The job that I came here for, my dream job, I realized that I didn't even like it. Okay. Yeah, it was toxic. And it was not a good fit for me. And so as soon as I made the decision to leave, the job that is now my dream job was like the first one on like the Indeed list. I applied for a bunch of jobs. The only callback I got, and it ended up being the perfect job for me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so it's interesting how all of that works out.
Yeah,
but, you know, it's not easy, but everything has to change.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that too. And I didn't want that to be the case. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that had to be the case for you too, because for me, you'd think it would be pretty obvious. I was homeless for years, right? You've heard my story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It had to be different because I also didn't live anywhere. I lived outside. So like it had to be different because it had to be a house. But also like all I knew was criminals and homeless tweakers and stuff. And so it had to be completely different, which for me in the beginning was just all NA people, which for me was good. We were all ensconced in recovery in that lifestyle. It was all I knew because I knew no people anymore, right? You know, so it was completely different. But you had a house, you had a job, you had a car, you know, but you still felt like it needed to be completely different for you too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just felt like the people that I had chosen to be friends with, it was never a choice. It was just the people that were kind of there. And after this happened and I realized how little the people actually cared that were supposed to be really close to me, it made me realize, you know, especially in 12-step recovery, the people there are so genuine and open and you can be your true self, which I didn't even know who that person was. I had no idea who that girl was. Maybe when I was a little kid, like that person was probably the real me, but since then it had been covered up with masks of the expectations of other people that I thought I needed to be.
Totally.
And so I'm trying to learn like who I am, what I enjoy, like who Carrie really is. Yeah. And it's been amazing because, you know, I'm just this nerdy girl and I'm so cool with it now.
I kind of feel like that too. Yeah. I read all the Game of Thrones books. On the bus. You know? And I'm like, I love it though. I used to be like that too a long time ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I love that part of me too. When I did that big podcast that I was just telling you about, I said, well, I was nerdy, I debated, and he was like, I could see that. And I think he was kind of trying to be funny. And I was like, good. Yeah. I'm glad you can still see that. I'm glad there's elements of that nerdy debate kid still in there, you know? So what has the work looked like to discover who you are? And what has your experience with the steps been? What has that given you?
The steps have been absolutely amazing. I didn't really understand what I was doing or why I was doing it at first, but I was really good at following directions. You know, I'm a good student, right? And so if my sponsor would give me an assignment, I would do it, sometimes dragging my feet, but I would do it. Step 4 was really interesting for me because when I was really happy writing down the resentments. I was like, oh yeah, this is fun, you know, writing down all the things that I didn't like about people because, you know, I was very judgmental and everything else. But the part that was very humbling for me is when my sponsor would have me explain why I had a resentment, and she would just be like, have this little smirk on her face and like do some scribbles on next to it. And I got the paper back from her, and next to all of these names, it just says mirror, mirror, mirror. Like all of these things that I didn't like about other people were the same behaviors that I was doing every single day to everyone else. Okay.
And did you see that when she wrote it down?
I was very mad. Did it annoy you? Of course it annoyed me. I was just like, how dare you? You know, I was very offended, but then I was like, okay, you're probably right. And so it was very humbling. I feel like for me, there's a lot of denial and grandiose feeling about myself. And then seeing that in black and white, like, okay, you're kind of a jerk. Like, okay, well, now I can see that I sort of am.
Is it BBA, the steps that you do?
No, just regular. Okay. I've heard about that. I would be interested in trying that out at some point.
So I went through the 4-step through BBA, and they have you add, and this is something I've now added with my sponsees. Normally it's just your part in it, right? Which, you know, say it was for me with my dad. It would be like my part in it is having these expectations on him later or whatever. Right. But also they add, have you ever done that behavior to someone else? And that to me is a really nice piece to add. That's a thought-provoking piece to add to this. Like if somebody cheated on you and you're really upset, did you ever cheat on anyone?
Right.
Or some sort of other betrayal type action.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I like that part of it too, when you like look at yourself. So the 4-step, releasing resentments. What other...
Step 2 and 3 were like very game changer. I mean, step 1, obviously, you know, my life's pretty damn unmanageable. My
husband's
Seems like
you knew that right away, though.
I think that was finally like the wake up call. Like, I like to joke and say, you know, my higher power like used to like whisper in my ear, like, you might want to get sober, you know, real like light and nice and sweet. And then finally, like, none of that worked. So I just got a drop kick in the face. And so it's like, wake up, biatch, you know, you need to get your shit together, like, period. And so for me, doing that, I did not grow up in a religious household at all. I never went to church. Like, the only time I went to church as a child is if I spent the night at a little girl's house and we went to church with their family. And so that whole idea to me was very foreign and very uncomfortable. And I thought that I would have to like go to church and do the whole, you know, Christian thing, and it's not what it's about at all. Totally,
it's not. I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of people think that, and it is not. You could choose to end up being a Christian, but you don't have to. No. It could be anything.
Yeah. So my sponsor just wanted me to be willing. She's like, I want you to pray. And I'm like, well, how do I do that? She's like, just talk to, you know, your higher power like you would talk to anybody else. And so I just remember sitting in my room on my bed, hey, God, it's me, Carrie. Like, I just felt so dumb. And I was like, this is so dumb. I can't believe I'm doing it. But the interesting thing is that on all of these days that I prayed, things would happen that I couldn't explain. An example of that would be the girl who took me to my first meeting. She reached out to me and said, hey, I have a friend who's in recovery. He just lost his girlfriend. Would you be willing to meet with him? So we went and met down by the beach, and we just kind of sat and talked and just had that connection. The book that the tip people gave me with all of the things to do, you know, after you have a loss, I gave him that book and was able to pass on that information to him.
Wow.
I had another coworker whose best friend had committed suicide, and he didn't pick up the phone before his friend killed himself. And so he's dealing with all of this, you know, grief and, you know, shame about not picking up the phone. And I'm like, no. You know, you never have to own that.
Totally.
And I didn't want to call him, but again, it was a day that I prayed, and I was like, should I? We're not that close, but you know, I think I need to.
You actually called him on the phone?
I called him, and we sat and talked and just, you know, checked up on him. I'm like, hey, is everything going okay? How are you? And so those are things that like my higher power keeps putting in my path. Like, here, Carrie, you want to be of service? Here's somebody that you can go help.
Man, I'm so selfish. It's hard for me to even want to say that. Like, I just interviewed this guy. His episode came out today. And the prayer that he prays daily is, put in front of me what you would like me to do and let me see it when it's there. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a good one. But I am so fucking selfish. I don't know if I want to ask that. I'm gonna, but I don't want to.
Look what you're doing right now. You're being of service in such a big way.
But also... I want to, this makes a little bit of money. It's also kind of a job. You know what I mean? Oh, but not a lot of money. You know what I'm saying? Like, in 5 years, it's like $1,000. So it's not like a money maker.
Don't diminish what you're doing. What you're doing is beautiful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you saying
powerful,
that.
And you're going to reach people in ways that other people can't.
Totally. And like I was telling you before we got started, I really did wrestle in the beginning with the idea of, because I'm a 12-step nerd. I love it. I love the literature. I love the principles. I love speaker meetings. I'm all in on 12-step. And so I did feel like this burden around, am I doing the right thing by completely blowing my anonymity and anybody else's that comes in? And I was like looking into the principles, and the reality is I kind of am, right? But the one rule would be connecting. Do I say exactly what 12-step group I go to? You can kind of get around it that way. But I have learned that there are a lot of people that actually don't know recovery is available. Recovery is free. It's possible. It can happen after any variety of traumatic events and challenges. People that don't know that. So I do feel like there are people that I'm reaching through their phone, through Spotify, through Apple, that wouldn't necessarily be in a position where they're going to get brought to a meeting, or, you know, we do have the ability to reach more people in this way.
Well, if you think about it, if that girl in my Toastmasters group had not, you know, blown her anonymity and gave a speech in the meeting,
about
then I would never have reached out to her. I would never shared with her. I would never gotten to my first meeting. Like, there's a lot of that. I think that for me, and this is just my opinion, but, you know, my anonymity is mine to give away. And if I want to say that. That's up to me, but I'm not going to tell everyone about yours.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how I feel too.
Yeah.
So you mentioned for a moment you're in a new relationship. When did you, and I think that's a nice thing to share without, any details or anything like that. I think it's a really nice thing to share that you came back from that grief and you moved on and you did find someone new, because I'm assuming you felt as though you wouldn't. I mean, you must have.
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I were together for like 13 years. Wow. So we were together a really long time. And so to get back out into dating, and for me, like the older you get, the weirder the people are. I don't know what it is.
I'm sure.
The more baggage that's there.
Did you do apps?
I did apps.
Okay.
So I went on Facebook dating. Actually, a sponsee of mine had recommended it or had mentioned it in passing. I'm like, I'll do that. It's free. It's not, I'll just see what's out there. And so I was very afraid. And I'm like, when does my past drug use come on? Is that date 1, date 2? Like, hey, I used to smoke meth, I mean,
right.
How do normal people respond to that? Right. And so I was very afraid of how that was supposed to look. How was I supposed to go on dates with normal people who do drink, and how was that going to be? And so there was a lot of fear associated with that. And so I prayed a lot about it. And I met this guy, and his profile said that he didn't drink or smoke. And I was like, okay, well, that's a good start. And so we were talking on the phone, and we got on a subject, and he said, well, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, I have this volunteer commitment. He said, a volunteer commitment? And I said, yeah, I cashier at bingo. He's like, where's there bingo in Oceanside? And I said, well, you know what the mission is? I said, it's a little club behind the mission called the Alano Club. And he just starts laughing, and he's like, are you a friend of Bill?
And he is too.
And he goes to meetings too. So I said, I am a friend of Bill. And I felt like all of that fear was completely washed away.
It's like a miracle.
It was interesting because it's like, well, now I can share anything with you. I'm not afraid to hold back.
Totally.
And his past is way worse than mine. So it's great.
I remember him leading at the meeting, but I don't totally remember what he said. That's fucking hilarious. Yeah, because he was a drug addict, right? Or like a big time addict. I remember this a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was just.
He was a great speaker too.
It's just interesting.
That's
because,
really funny.
We both had this connection, and we didn't meet in meetings, but he had lived in Oceanside for a while, so we probably crossed paths, but just never had connected. And so he was living in South Bay at the time in Chula Vista, and I was up here, and so we were doing a lot of back and forth commuting. And so he has a recovery community down there, and I had a recovery community up here, and so we've kind of crossed over to where all of the people that we hang out with now are in recovery.
Totally.
And it's an amazing, fun life. And I never thought that doing anything sober would be any fun.
It's the most fun.
It's the most fun.
They are the funniest people. Like, I've never laughed harder in my life than at meetings or with sober people.
Yeah.
They're the funniest people you'll ever meet in your entire life. I mean, crying, laughing. The hardest I ever laughed in my life was at my rehab at Choices. We had a morning meeting, and we would fuck around before the meeting and smoke cigarettes outside and drink coffee, and I would cry laughing. Hardest I've ever laughed in my whole life to this day. And I also was like, I'm not gonna have any fun sober, and it's the most fun.
It's interesting because I never had any fun. Well, I'm not gonna say never, but never fun, like true fun when I was drinking or using.
Totally.
Like I would have fun in my mind for like a few minutes until I just took it too far, which happened every time.
Right, yeah.
And so, I was always chasing something. I was chasing this feeling of just contentment and peace. And, when I talk and give speeches at like meetings and stuff like that, I talk about like serenity and how coming into the program, I had no idea what that meant because I had never experienced it before. It's like, how does a new person even know what that means? Because you don't coming in. You're like, I know chaos. I know all of this craziness, but I don't know what peace even feels like. And so I like to describe it like if you take away, anger, fear, resentments, uncomfortableness in your own skin, and remove all of that, what does life feel like then? And that's what serenity is for me. It's like, it's the absence of all the garbage.
Yeah.
It's like just kind of like taking the counter and like sweeping all the crap off the counter. Totally. And it's just like, it's not like a high or an elated feeling.
Right.
It's just content.
Yeah.
And most days in sobriety are just content. There's no drama.
Right. Totally. Yeah. What does a daily routine look like for you that keeps you connected to sobriety? So
I started doing this activity about a little over 2 years ago. So later in my sobriety, I went to a workshop with a friend of mine who was talking about two-way prayer. And it's a way that you write a letter to your higher power, but the magic is that your higher power writes a letter back to you. And so I'll give you an example of what that sounds like. Like, dear Carrie, I'm always with you. You know that you're never alone. Thank you for connecting with me. Make sure you check up on these people today that you know are struggling. All of the things that a higher power would say, or a parent, someone who loves and cares for you unconditionally and says, it's going to be okay.
So what does that look like in practice? You sit down and you first write to your higher power, dear God, I'm struggling today with disorganization and this and that. And then you allow it free flow right back to yourself. So
I'll write a letter saying either gratitude. Hey, thanks for all the stuff that you've been doing for me. Thanks for this life. Thanks for my sobriety. Like, gratitude. This is stuff I'm struggling with. Here's some people I'm worried about. And then I'll meditate. And I have no attention span. So my meditation is maybe 5 minutes.
Okay. Just listening to music or just sitting there?
I sit on the floor. I turn on the music. Wherever my cat is in the house, she comes and sits next to me.
Okay.
She likes to meditate too for some reason. It's adorable. And so we sit there for about 5 minutes and then I write my letter back.
Whoa. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. No one's ever told me. This is the first time I've been doing the show for a million years. I've never heard this.
It's a complete game changer for me. Because for me,
I'm going to start doing this.
It right sizes my day. If the earlier I do it, the better.
Okay.
I can't say that I do it perfectly. I can't say that I haven't missed days.
Yeah, because you have like a 9 to 5. So that means you're doing it at 6 in the morning if you do.
If I do it in the morning and I'm not doing other things.
Right.
And so it's making the time for it no matter what. That's been on my list of defects is that I'm consistently inconsistent with everything that I do.
Same.
And so trying to just make it a discipline because I'm always putting my needs last. So I'll do the laundry before I go and meditate. I'll go, run an errand before I go meditate. It's like I put everything else first besides my own things that I know are going to make me feel great.
But see, it seems like you're putting your needs first by taking, I feel like that is putting my needs first by taking care of like the laundry and the this and the that. But I guess it's really not.
It's not.
Of course.
Because I know that if I don't get the laundry done, I'm not going to be insane in my mind at the end of the day.
Right.
But if I go 2 or 3 days without meditating and doing this exercise, I am going to be just a complete train wreck in my mind.
Totally. So you try to do that daily. If you miss it in the morning, you just do it later?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it in my car. I haven't done it yet today. So I knew that I was going to be having kind of back-to-back things today.
Yeah.
And so I brought it in the car so that I could do it in some downtime today.
Wow, that's so cool. I love that. That's the coolest practice I've ever heard.
It's completely changed my relationship with my higher power because I heard in a meeting once a guy said, if you didn't talk to your family for like 2 weeks, how would your relationship be with them? Your partner, you just don't talk to them for 2 weeks. Like that's how your relationship with your higher power is.
Totally.
You can't just, call them up every 2 weeks and expect your life to be good. Like you have to have daily connection.
Right.
And, for me, it's really uncovered a lot of things that I need to work on for myself and just old behaviors that keep cropping up, and one of them is people pleasing, to where I'm putting everyone else's needs first. That's something that's new that's come up in the last few months.
And that'll come out in your writing. It'll say something like, also be aware you're giving too much to this one person. You shouldn't be, something like that.
Yeah, it'll be like, you need to put yourself first and the things that make you feel good.
That is so, this is the cool, I'm going to start doing this as a practice. This is the coolest thing ever.
I feel like that's one of the things that I've gotten out of this recovery is that I pray all the time now. And it's not like this big drawn out thing, but just coming on this show today, I'm like, please God, get me through this today. Let me say something that's meaningful.
So good.
Let me say something that's helpful for people. And it kind of takes the stress away. The fact that we had to restart
was good.
It's I feel much more comfortable.
Yeah,
so I like to practice round.
We'll pretend I did on purpose. Okay. I didn't, but I could tell as we got going, because you can tell that the you felt the responsibility of this, and as we got started, you definitely seemed a little bit nervous, a little bit emotional. So I'm glad we had to restart. But it's also, and this is I'm sure something you've uncovered about yourself, like the nerdy side, that's a good thing. It's also good to have that emotional connection and to have that caring. I have that too. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a beautiful side of you. But I'm glad we had to restart then. Yeah. Dude, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is incredible. I can't believe this is the first interview you've ever done. You're a fucking natural.
Thank you.
I'm so, and this was obviously fated to be. I wanted to ask you a year ago, and then Nakia did, and I'm so glad.
Well, I'm glad too, because a lot of things have been the layers have gone since that time.
Of course, yeah.
A couple years ago, my dad was still here, so I didn't have any of that experience with my mom.
Yeah.
I hadn't even started this practice with the 2-step prayer. So a lot of these things that are, I think, really meaningful in my recovery are relatively recent.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. Like, if you're new to recovery, like, it takes a long time to kind of, get to a place where you feel okay, but it's worth it if you just keep going and moving forward. But, my boyfriend and I, we love doing stuff in recovery. We do events with friends. We go to plays. We go to concerts. We go to movies. I mean, we're traveling all the time, and we just have so much fun together. And I think my favorite thing doing as a sober woman is going and seeing live music.
Yeah.
Because if you go to a concert and you're drinking, you're spending half of your time in the beer line. Beer is like $20 or $30 now at a concert. It's ridiculous. I would have been broke. But standing in line to get a drink and then going to the bathroom, and you miss the entire show.
Totally.
And now I get to be present, and I get to see the music, and I love hearing about musicians, especially ones that I really enjoy, who are also sober and in recovery.
Yeah.
I feel like it takes it to the next level too.
Yeah. What's your favorite concert you've ever gone to?
We've gone to a lot. We just got back from
top 3, maybe.
We just got back from Long Beach. There was a reggae festival called Cali Vibes.
Okay.
Amazing. So there's all kinds of bands there that we've been exploring. We actually found one of these bands by accident, got on that Pandora station and went down this entire rabbit hole of all these other bands. And so right now, I think for me, like the Elevators, Dirty Head, Stick Figure, like all of those are like my top 3.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. That's really cool. I can't thank you enough for coming over here today.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it so much.
Thank
you. I know my audience is going to learn from you, and I'm so honored that you felt comfortable and vulnerable enough to share your amazing story. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me.